So imagine somebody offered you a job with a huge title and massive expectations. You never did the job before, and they would not give you a job description. Oh, and the job is going to change dramatically every 2 to 3 years. Is that a job you would take? Sort of the job you've taken, isn't it, as a parent? Parents have been operating that way for generations, right? I mean, parenting is the biggest job in the world. It's the most challenging job in the world. I think it's the most noble job in the world. And it's always been the most ambiguous job in the world. Everyone just tells you, hey, just follow your instincts. You'll be a natural. You're the expert on your own kids, right? When I was raising my daughter, I was desperate for a manual from birth through college, actually. I wished my parents had had a manual, if you know what I mean. And I was actually really shocked that there are not time management brochures handed out in the maternity ward with every baby that is born, or sitting on display in the waiting room of every pediatrician's office, or in the office of every school your kids go to. They don't exist. And in my 30 plus years as a professional organizer and a time management coach, and I have practiced all over the world. I have worked across cultures. I've worked with dads and moms and people with babies and people with college-age kids and everything in between. Wherever I have gone in the world, there's 2 patterns. Pattern number 1 is every parent who tries to learn organizing or time management skills has the same goal. It's to create space for quality time with their kids and quality time for themselves. That's been true all over the US, Asia, Europe, Africa, the Middle East. Universal goal. The second thing is, I just heard the same sort of pattern of questions, which is, how do I choose between conflicting priorities? How do I choose between, how am I choosing between being there for my kids, but not losing myself in the process? Or after the kids go to bed, do I go and spend time with my spouse, or do I get back on the computer and get a little more work done, right? Or if I get any time to myself, do I spend it with my friends or my extended family, or do I just take a nap? And what no one ever talks about is the fact that the years we are raising our kids are the prime of our own adult development years. The years you're raising your kids is also when you are establishing and cultivating your career. It's the peak of your earning capacity. You're establishing adult love relationships with a significant other and a circle of friends, and we're discovering who we are as people, right? Because you don't really know when you're 18 or 17. It's like you're starting to discover. And the one thing that I have come to know as a time management expert is that job ambiguity in any position, in any role, is a recipe for overwork, inefficiency, and insecurity, right? If you don't have a job description, how do you know when your day is done? How do you know how you're doing? How do you know when you're done for the day and you can take time for yourself? You don't. So I decided I'm going to take it on. I couldn't write this book while I was in the throes of child rearing. Had to wait till my daughter had flown the nest. And I was able to step out of that ocean and stand on the shore and reflect. And I decided I'm going to be the first person who dares write the manual that parents have been craving for generations. And I decided that I had to do research for this book, because I'm a time management and an organizing expert, but I'm not a child development expert. And I didn't dare purport to tell parents how to spend their time if I didn't really know what the experts said kids need. So I actually spent 8 years diving deep into the research and the science of human development. I read dozens of books. I interviewed experts in every field: psychiatry, psychology, pediatrics, economics, sociology. I did lots of focus groups around the country with parents and families and kids. And I had one, and I read thousands of studies. Oh my God, I read so many studies. I had not done since college, I hadn't done any research. I mean, I got so lost in those stacks. I would read all the studies, then I would read all the studies in the bibliography of the study. Anybody ever do that? I read one 75-page study. And when I got to the end of it, I realized it was only the instructions explaining how another study was actually conducted. It was a lot of research. And I had one question for all that research, which is it's the critical question, which is how much time and attention do kids need to feel loved and secure? Because if we know the answer to that, we can kind of make room for the rest. And it was really hard to find the answer. No expert wanted to tell me. They were like, well, it depends on the kid, it depends on the situation. I had one psychiatrist early in the research who said, oh, parents always just want a menu. I was like, yeah, we do. Just give us a menu, the edges, and then we at least know the parameters. So I dug and I dug and I dug, and I found the answer. And it's really quite liberating. So I will start by sharing that with you. How much time and attention do kids need to feel loved and secure? So as it turns out, children thrive on short bursts of 5 to 15 minutes at a time of truly undivided attention delivered consistently, more than big blocks of time delivered occasionally. Short bursts, 5 to 15, 20 minutes tops at a time. Why? Because children have short attention spans. And many experts say to calculate about a minute for each age of life. If you think about that, a 1-year-old has about a 1-minute attention span before their eyes drift to the next shiny object. A 5-year-old, 5 minutes. A 15-year-old, if you're gonna have a conversation with a 15-year-old, how long is that gonna last? 15 minutes if you're lucky, right? And the key about consistency is this, that what we need to do is build it into the fabric of the day. And if you think about it, there are 5 key transition points in a kid's day. There's when they first wake up, there's when you separate at the beginning of the day, it's when you get home, reunite at the end of the day, whatever time that is, dinner and bedtime. 5 transition points. If we spend the first moments of every one of those transitions giving kids that undivided attention, that's what experts say creates the baseline of security, that I am loved and I am important. It's kind of the opposite of the way we work, right? When I was raising my daughter, it was morning was hurry up, get dressed, we're late, where's your backpack? Did we sign the thing? And if we got through all of that, then there would be space for quality time. And the idea is to do the opposite. If you start with the first moments, then you have that baseline, and then together but apart time is also very healthy and good for kids. You get home at the end of the day. It's not, why is the house a mess? Did you do your homework? Did you practice your piano? Did anybody start dinner? Why is it always me cooking dinner? It's not that. It's how is everybody doing? When you first start, it's those first moments that really count. And then the rest you can have together but apart time. The other thing that I found when I did this research, and I was very surprised by, is that science seemed to be exploding with discovery that this kind of regular, reliable nurturance is as essential to human development as food and sunshine. I think it's very liberating to know that this sort of short burst consistency, rather than the big blocks of time, is what it takes, because every parent can deliver that. You can be a working parent, you could work 2 jobs, and you could do this. I tell you, when I was raising my daughter, I was a single mom, I had my own business. I felt so guilty working all day that by the time I got home, from the minute I walked through that door, I felt like I had to be all on all the time to make up for having worked, which left no time for me, except after she went to bed, which what does that lead to? You're up all night, you're on your phone, you're doing stuff, and you don't get enough sleep. And it's unnecessary that you can actually weave everything in if you change the texture and you change the approach. It's very, very liberating. So I was originally just going to write the book about how to make the space for the quality time and how to actually deliver it. Because even when you make the space for it, it's kind of hard to do. Like, you can't relate very easily to all your kids, hard to slow your brain down and really be present for your kids. So I pitched the book as that, and I sold the book to my publisher as that. And then I was working on the book. And I was swimming one day. And when I swim, it's like my meditative space. All my thoughts kind of come together. And I was swimming. I was already working on the book. And I got out of the pool one day and I was like, I can't write a book just about quality time for parents, because there's so many other kinds of time a parent has to deliver. And if I only write about the quality time, it's not going to be helpful, because parents will be like, that sounds great. What about all the other stuff I have to do? So I was like, what is it? What is all the stuff a parent has to do? What is it that we have to deliver? How do you think about it? And so here it is. Just like any job description, this is how to think about how to organize your time for the full span of the parenting years. Okay, so first, divide the job into two parts: raising a human and being a human. And then each of those have 4 components. So to raise happy, healthy children, we as adults have to divide our time between 4 activities. We have to provide for our kids, right? We have to work and make and manage money so we can pay for all the things that they need. We have to arrange the logistics of our kids' lives, right? Where are they going to go to school? How are they going to get there? What are they having for lunch? What are we having for dinner? What are we doing on the weekend? Where are we going on vacation? We have to relate to our kids, which is that quality one-on-one time to get to know each of them for the unique individuals they are. And we have to spend time teaching our kids, right? Like life skills and values so they can succeed in the world. Provide, arrange, relate, teach. 4 activities, covers it. It also spells an acronym, PART, as in doing your part for another person. So as adults, we're responsible for our children's well-being, but we're also responsible for our own. And to be a happy, healthy human, we also need to divide our time between 4 activities. What are they? We have to spend time on sleep, right? Which usually gets a little bit of a chuckle in a room full of parents, because sleep is like very hard to protect as a parent, whether it's because you have an infant that's waking you up all night or you have a teenager that you're waiting up all night for, right? But sleep is very hard, but it's critical. We also have to spend time on exercise, physical fitness, so that we feel energetic and we can keep up with our kids and we have confidence. We have to spend time on love, which is the adult relationships in our life. And we have to spend time on fun. And by fun, what I mean is the hobbies or the passions that make you feel like you. Sleep, exercise, love, fun also spells an acronym. Anybody see it? Self, as in fueling yourself. All right, fueling yourself. So that's it. This is actually the entire juggling act. It covers everything. The job description for the parenting years is not juggling an infinite number of things. It's not juggling 8,000. It's not juggling 2. It's 8. It's 4 for your kids and 4 for yourself. Now here's where it gets really, really interesting. We think as adults that time spent on any one of these under part counts as all time in, right? So whatever our mix is, it's all time in. But kids experience each of these kinds of time very differently. And it is, I've always wondered, I always marveled at this very common phenomenon that you ever hear of like parents who say, I sacrificed my whole life for my kids. And those kids say, my parents were never there for me. Happens all the time. How does that happen? Why is that? That's because some of the things that we do for our kids are visible to them and some are invisible. Some take place in the adult world and some take place in the kids' world. So if you look at it as a matrix, And you look in the upper left corner, provide, which takes a massive amount of time working, takes place in the adult world, but that time is largely, it's invisible to our kids. The kids don't see it, they just know we're not there. Arrange takes place in the kids' world, because if you don't pack their lunch, they know. If you forget to pick them up, they notice. But the amount of time that it takes to arrange the logistics for your kids is largely invisible to them. And it is a massive job that everybody grossly underestimates how much time that takes. Relate and teach are the two activities that we do for our kids that are visible to them. But even they are different. And I think we very often conflate them, and we think teaching is relating and quality time. They're different. And here's a good way to think about it when you look on this matrix. When we're teaching our kids, we are bringing them into the adult world, and they are the students of us. When you relate to your kids, you are entering your child's world, and you are the student of the child, getting to know them. They feel very different on the receiving end. And every expert that I spoke to emphasized that in order to teach, we always have to start with relate, right? Because people will listen, kids will listen if they feel understood first. And that's actually true of adults, right? Like, who's going to listen if you don't understand me? When I was raising my daughter, there was a point when she was around 8 years old that she used to come home after school and watch Jerry Springer. I was like, oh my God, my child's watching Jerry Springer. Are you kidding me? I was like, Jessie, no. Let's go to the park. Let's go to a museum. Let's do a craft. Let's do something enriching. She was like, no, I'm watching Jerry Springer. And I could not get her out of that sofa watching Jerry Springer. I was mortified. This was not the values that I wanted my child to be learning. And I would say this went on for a couple of months, and I could not convince her to stop watching. And she was 8, it's kind of hard. You could like turn the TV off. But so finally one day I decided I'm going to go in and I'm going to watch with her, because I could not get her out. And I just went in and I started watching every day. I would sit there and watch, took all the judgment off my face, and I just sat there and watched with her. And after a while, I just said to her, what is it that you like about this show? And she said, I'm just fascinated with what people are willing to do to be on television. I was so relieved. And so it was like, oh, and then once I understood, and she knew I understood, and I wasn't judging, and then I was like, okay, let's go out to the park, and she was ready to come. So when we are struggling on the teach, always start with relate, and you can pull your kids, you connect. I'll tell you one other story about this, actually. I think that's really important. I was coaching a working mom who I'd been coaching her for quite a while in her career. And she contacted me one day and we had a session, and she said she was thinking about leaving her job. And because her daughter, who was 12, was starting to really struggle socially with everything. And her daughter, they used to always have dinner as a family and spend time. Their daughter everything was explosive. The daughter didn't want to spend any time with the family anymore. And so there was a 12-year-old daughter and there was a 9-year-old son. And the mom was so worried about her daughter and was unable to connect to her. And the daughter wanted nothing to do with the family. She was like, I think I have to stop working and spend more time with my daughter and try to. And I said, well, before you do that, let's just look. And I drew this out for her. And she looked at this, and because I thought, like, maybe we find ways to contain the time on provide, and, what can we do? And when she looked at this, she was like, oh my God. We are so concerned about our daughter and how unhappy she is and how much trouble she's having with that. Every minute that we spend with her, we are trying to teach her. We are saying, honey, this is going to pass. It doesn't matter if you got that many likes on Facebook or not, et cetera, et cetera. And their daughter just was like, didn't want to spend time with them because it was so much pressure. And she and her husband made the commitment to spend 70% of their time just relating. No matter what their daughter presented, just relate and stop teaching. And literally overnight, the tension came out of the household and their daughter started to spend time with them again. She was struggling so much. I was like, please stop telling me how to fix my life. I just want to be. So it's very powerful to think about those differences. So let's look at the self. Oh, here we go. So self. So what gets in the way of self? Now I want to sort of ask you. So self, of course we know we should sleep and we need to exercise and we should cultivate our marriages and our social lives. And of course we should do our hobbies, we think. Or maybe you're supposed to wait till your kids go off to college for that part, right? What keeps us from spending time on the self, even though we know we want to and we know we need to? What gets in the way? Work? So much time and provide that there's no time left. What else? Guilt. Any time I spend on myself, I'm stealing from either my job or my kids or somebody, right? It feels like you're stealing that time. So I think that is one of the first things is guilt. We have some kind of programming, societal program, that when you become a parent, you're supposed to sacrifice yourself for your kids. But we really overestimate our ability to perform and do our part when we are sleep deprived, when we haven't exercised, when our marriages and our social lives are like drifting apart and we're worried about them and we think, okay, we'll get to that later. And when we like kind of lose track of who we are, we overestimate. The truth is every single one of them plays a different function. It's not about choosing, if I get time to myself, I get to choose one. All of them play a separate role. And if any one of them are not tended to, we're off balance. And they help us to be able to do our part. They also role model for kids what it means to be an adult. And study after study says if parents exercise, kids exercise. If parents have social lives, they're modeling it, kids they see it getting modeled. I think the other thing, and this did not occur to me till I was writing the book and this other research that I had done on the kids, I was like, wait a minute. The other thing that keeps us from spending time on self-care is our approach. For the first 25 or 30 years of our lives, self-care was always big blocks of time. Date night, hanging out with friends was for hours on end. Exercise was 90 minutes 3 times a week at the gym, or a 1-hour Pilates class every night after work. We spent all day on our hobbies on Saturday and Sunday, right? We had all the time in the world. When you become a parent, you can't count on those big blocks of time. So what happens? You only get to go to the gym once every 6 weeks. You're like, why bother? Like, this isn't fun. And we don't make the adjustment on our relationships, exercise, all of that. So the secret to fitting this in is actually the same exact solution as for our kids, which is short bursts of self-care. And with sleep as one exception, we need our 7 or 8 hours a night. But when you aren't able to get enough sleep, rest and recovery, rest in 20-minute doses or less, 20-minute doses of exercise or less, 20-minute doses of fun. And it's just changing your entire approach. So what does that look like? Here's an example. So let's start with exercise. I'm going to talk about exercise and love first. Exercise, 90 minutes 3 times a week, that's what we think. That is an old notion. Exercise science keeps proving that short burst, high intensity interval training and short burst movement is better for every marker of physical health, heart health, everything. The internet, the YouTube is filled with hundreds of 8-minute high intensity interval training workouts you can do in the morning while somebody's brushing their teeth or while they're doing their homework. You can fit in anywhere you are in the world. You could fit in an 8-minute workout 5 days a week. You could actually do that. You could take the stairs in your building instead of the elevator when you go to work. And that kind of short burst movement has as much impact, if not more, as the big blocks. So that's one. The love. So when I did the book, I interviewed lots and lots of couples. And almost every couple said, we know we are not spending enough time on our marriage, but we have absolutely no idea how to fix that. There's not enough time for date nights, very expensive. And by the way, when we go out on date night, we just sort of stare at each other across the table. We have nothing to talk about. And all we're thinking about is how expensive this evening is. But there were a handful of couples who had clearly really close connections as a couple, separate from their role as parents. And I asked every one of them, I was like, how do you do it? How do you maintain your connection as a couple? And they all reported the same basic pattern of behavior. And here's what it was. Every one of them talked about some habit of what I came to call daily glue, which is 3 to 5 times a day during the day when they were separated, either both at work or one at home and one at work. They would check in with each other for like 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Text, FaceTime, phone call. How was your commute? How did the meeting go? What did you have for lunch? What's going on with the kids? Da, da, da. First, when people were telling me that, I was like, oh my God, that sounds so tedious. Like, I don't want to hear somebody's like what they had for lunch. But what did that do for those couples? It meant that by the time they got home at night, they had less to catch up on. And when you're raising kids, there's never enough time to catch up in the evening. So just by checking in, then they tended to all talk about doing all the logistics via email. They didn't do much of the business of family and logistics verbally. So everybody could do it on their own schedule. And that meant that by the end of the evening after dinner and the kids are in bed and they both had maybe 20 minutes of energy left, they didn't have to catch up from their day. They didn't have to talk household logistics. They could just spend it connecting with each other. That is the application of short bursts of nurturance of a relationship, even without date night. You can do that with anything. Fun, same thing. People are usually like, are you kidding me? I can't have my hobbies now. But those hobbies are the things that keep you so grounded as a parent. So what's the short burst version? I was coaching a client who, after she had kids, she used to act in local community theater. And who can be in a community theater when you're raising kids? You're in rehearsal every night and weekend. She couldn't do it anymore. And she had just sort of lost her rudder. And she just kind of felt not like her. So I was like, well, where's your, what is it? It was theater. So what is a 20-minute version or less of that you could fold into the day? So she was like, I could study monologues. And so she started to study monologues, and she would just study monologues 20 minutes a night, and she would do a monologue a month. And then she got together with a friend, and they would just do it for each other. And that kept that piece of her alive in short bursts of time. So that's the idea, short bursts. And that is it. That is the whole job description. So what does it do for you? By putting up the edges, I think it helps us be present, right? Because I think 30% of a parent's brain and focus is whatever they're doing, they're thinking about, what am I missing? What am I not getting to? What am I neglecting? When you see the edges, you can be present wherever you are because you know where you are on the playing board, and then you can go to the next thing. It also helps you recognize where you are doing well. And I think parents don't do that enough. I think parents are so focused on what they're missing, they don't give themselves credit for where they're doing well. And then it helps you evaluate where you're coming up short, because we tend to gravitate toward the things we're good at and away from the things where we don't feel so confident, right? Or we parent exactly the way we were parented, or in direct opposition to the way we were parented. And this helps you see your blind spots. And in the book and online, on our website, we have the self-assessment. If you get the book, you can take it, or you can just go online. It's free, and you can take it as many times as you want. Where you can sort of see for each of the 8 quadrants, what am I spending too much time on, not enough time on, or just the right amount? And it's going to vary at any stage of your life with your kids. It's not stagnant. And there are patterns that emerge, these patterns. So I'm going to introduce some of these patterns to you and see if you can sort of relate or recognize. So there are people who, particularly in part, are sort of stronger. They gravitate toward a couple and away from a couple. So there's people who are high provide, high teach. It's kind of what I call the breadwinner. It's a little bit of the old father knows best. Goes off and works and then comes home and says, kids gather round. I'm going to tell you about the ways of the world. I'm going to teach you a thing or two. But they have no idea how dinner got on the table. And they're not like they're really listening or connecting to their kids. They are the teacher. The opposite, which might have been June Cleaver in the old days, the hearth maker. This is often a stay-at-home parent, really good at arrange and always has open arms and really great relating to kids, but perhaps is sacrificing their career and not playing any role in the guiding. This is the most common profile. We've had several thousand people take this survey, self-assessment, and 28% consistently are responsible doers. These are people who are high provide, high arrange, low relate, low teach. What is that profile? That's a get it done person. That is someone who gets stuff done, has their checklist, done. But slowing down to the speed of kids, torture. Like the minute you slow down, all you're thinking about is what to do, am I not getting to? And then the opposite is what I call the Mary Poppins. This is someone who's amazing with kids. They relate to them, they teach them, but like the kids are probably eating peanut butter and jelly 7 times a day. We don't have any money, but it's okay because we're happy. I actually did not write about this profile in my book because I didn't even know they existed. Because they don't come to me, they don't hire us. They're just happy. And sometimes what happens in a dual income family is both parents are the responsible doers and the babysitter is the Mary Poppins. And that doesn't feel good. You just feel like, no, maybe the kids are getting everything they need, but it doesn't feel fulfilling. And then the last pair, which is kind of interesting, this other pattern. So this is a lot of the stay-at-home moms that I have worked with have fallen into this family manager, which is really high arranged. That house is running like the trains are on time, the place is clean, the meals are all organic, there is no waste. And they are teaching those kids life skills. They want to make sure their kids have life skills, but they are not taking any time to just be. And they're probably not working. They're pouring all of their intellect and their work energy into the arranging of the house, which doesn't usually feel as gratifying as pouring it into some kind of work. And then the opposite is what I call the best friend. And this is a kind of work hard, play hard person. Works all day, comes home, really relates to the kids, but is not going to discipline them because we don't have enough time. I'm not going to have any conflict. And I also don't know how dinner got on the table, but it's very tasty. Thank you. It's great. So can you see yourself can you see your spouse? Can you see your parents? Does this explain your childhood to you? It's kind of what happens. So nothing is locked in stone. This is just to be aware of our tendencies, but the goal is actually to cover all the bases. And I actually think every parent, to feel whole, wants to touch every one of those quadrants. And it changes. You just use it as a rudder. You use it as a rudder as you move through and adjust to your kids' needs, their ages, the ups and downs of your career and your job and your relationship. It's very dynamic. This is just a kind of a control panel. It's like a rudder. And the solutions are far easier and simpler than you think on any one of these. If the goal is to make time for each of these, but also contain time on each so nothing takes over at the expense of everything else. So it's 8 things, right? It's 8 things. It's not 2, it's not 4. But even these 8, I mean, it's a lot of different skills. There is not a single human on earth who is good at all 8 of those. Nobody can do it all. And it's also really hard to switch between all of these 8, right? Like, because that's the juggling act. It's like, how do you move from like the raising to the being or the adult time to the kid time? It's not that easy. But first you have to know what's the playing board. The second thing is what are the skills it takes to move between them? And there are 4, and I talk about them in the book. Of all the time management skills, and there are many, there are 4 time management skills that I think are unique and specific to parents that enable you to move between these 8 different responsibilities. So the first one is what I would call selective perfectionism. How would perfectionism keep you from being able to cover all 8 of these quadrants? Never good enough, right? Whatever you're doing, you're like, that's not good enough. And when things are not good enough, you get stuck in a quadrant. You can't leave because until it's done. So you get stuck in each one. So I have a strategy called Max Mod Min, which is a tool to break perfectionism, which is all or nothing thinking, that things are either fantastic, amazing, or a disaster, right? That's what perfectionist thinking is. It's black and white thinking. Things are fabulous, or I can never show my face in public again. I did this so badly. So for any task in any quadrant that threatens to kind of swallow you whole, or you can't, it's just too much, you're running out of time, you define 3 levels of performance for it before you do it. You define what is the maximum I could do, what is the minimum I could do, and what is the moderate. And like a great example of that is it's your kid's birthday and you have to bring in something to celebrate at school. What is the maximum you could do? Come on, you've done it. What is the maximum? You got to bring in some kind of cake and candles for the birthday. Maximum, you bake that cake from scratch in a 3-dimensional shape as your kid's favorite cartoon character, right? And you have specialized party favors that have the name of every single kid on them. That's the max. You're like, I'm never going to do that. Nope. What's the minimum you could do? You don't have time to bake that cake. Costco, you go and get that sheet cake and you just go and deliver it. Cupcakes. Yeah, and what's the moderate? What's that? Pretzels? Pretzels and potato chips. You don't even get cake. It's not good for you, kids. You're going to get a sugar rush. So one is you just buy a sheet cake. One is you make a cake from scratch, some fancy thing. And the other is maybe you get a box mix and you make them and it looks like a homemade cake, comes out of the oven, and there it goes, right? So it gives you options. So that's number one. You can do that for anything, work, exercise, all of that. It's not all or nothing. The second skill, and this is one of the most important, is to resist the lure of technology. There is nothing that is a bigger thief of our ability to be present for anything we're doing than our screens. Nothing. It's the greatest enemy to presence in our society, right? But we need technology. It's not all or nothing either. So what do? You have to kind of be a media mentor, because you actually are a media mentor to your kids, whether you know it or not. That is like modern day parenting. How you are with your technology is how your kids are going to be. There are lots of things that you can do. One thing is, I think, and I learned this from a tech guy who had his own business, a guy who founded Fatherly, if anyone's ever seen Fatherly, it's a website, who often worked from home, and he made it a habit that whenever his kids entered the room, if he was working from home and he was on his device, he would turn it over and turn to his kids, or if he was on his laptop, he would instantly shut the laptop and turn to his kids. And that's because when you're on the receiving end of you're talking to somebody and they're on their device, what do you think? They're not present, they don't care, you're not the most important thing in the room. Technology, my assistant who was working with me on this book, she was from Silicon Valley, and she had done her graduate research to answer the question, does technology bring us closer together or further apart? And here's what she discovered. Technology brings us closer to people who are geographically far away, but it separates us from people who are geographically nearby. It's a really powerful image. And if you just keep that in mind, then you can use technology for its power and not let it disconnect you from presence. So one of the things that when you publish a book, the publisher asks you what little promo item you want? And I said, I want cell phone pouches that say, be here now. Which just puts a little barrier between you and that temptation to just go to that device mindlessly for whatever. When you want to be present with your kids, if you want to be present at dinner, if you want to be present for your workout, or you're going to meditate for 5 minutes, it's not really good to meditate and keep checking your texts. Doesn't work. Not as effective. So we have I think we brought like 30 or 35, so the first 30 or 35 books that you guys buy, each one gets a cell phone pouch. And the other thing you can do with technology is to synchronize tech time in the house. And I think this is really, a lot of people don't think about this. The idea is that everybody's on their devices at the same time and everybody's off their devices at the same time. And if you simply synchronize, these are the moments when we are on, and you have, like in the front of your entry, you can have a parking lot. Just like Japanese homes, you take your shoes off, sacred space into the house. You can have a docking station. You can have a little sign that says, be here now, or love the one you're with. And just keep the phones there. You're in the house, and then it's 7 o'clock after dinner, everybody, we can all go on our devices for a half an hour, an hour. But that actually would make a difference because we stay disconnected because I want to talk to you. I'm ready to talk, but you're on your device, and I see that, and then I'm like, okay. Then I get on my device, and then when you're done, whatever email or text or news thing you were looking at, then you're like, you want to talk? I'm like, I'm busy now. And that is a domino effect in a household. So just synchronize the time. 2 more techniques that I want to kind of introduce you to that help you. This is to master mindful transitions, the third technique, the third skill that will help you manage the board. It's just switching between these 8 quadrants is not easy. But if you actually stop before every threshold and you say to yourself, what is my intention on the other side of that door? You make a mindful transition. It helps you make the shift. So after you leave the house in the morning and before you walk through the door to your job, set your intention for the other side of that door is, I'm coming here to work. I'm coming here to be focused. No matter how crazy it was in the car on the way here, I'm present. When you come home at night, before you cross the threshold, stop texting, stop email, get very clear in your head, and you set your intention for the other side of that door to just greet everybody and let them know you're so excited that they live in your house with you, and you're so happy to see them. You want to know how they are. That will, if you put your kids to bed at night and you're about to go in the living room to hang out with your spouse, you need to shed the kid brain and go into adult mode. You just set your intention for the other side of that door before you go. It takes a minute. This is not a time burden. It's just a consciousness thing. What do I want to communicate on the other side of that door? If you do that, you will find, without adding any time to your schedule, you can be fully present in almost everywhere you are. And you know, the reality is you're not going to be fully present all day. Like even monks don't achieve that. But if there were 3 or 4 moments every day where you were fully present, wherever it is wouldn't that be amazing? It's like a pretty good count. So just try to get more of those moments. Set your intention. And the last is to build a village and delegate. So today's generation of parents, I spoke with Melissa Milkey, who's been studying families for generations. And I asked her, what's unique about this generation of parents? And she said, this generation of parents, there's 2 unique things about this generation. One is today's generation of parents really get the investment they're making by having kids. They're not just like blindly having kids the way parents in the 50s you grow up, you go to college, you get married, you have kids, you have a house in the suburbs. It's not mindless. People know, and they're so committed to being there for their kids and doing a great job, conscious parenting. But also, it's the first generation in history that really thinks and tries to do it all themselves. That they're just they think that they are the one who can provide everything for their kids, and they're the ones who are the best and the only person. And they get very isolated. And I asked her what advice she would give today's parents, and she said the one piece of advice she would give is to think of your family as beyond the walls of your house, which is into your community, because it's just too big a job for any one or two people to do, to get the logistical help, to get the emotional support, and to really build a village around yourself, and learn to delegate, particularly in the arrange quadrant, which is the most delegatable stuff of all, which then frees you up to be present with your kids and for yourself. So that's it. That is our 4 skills. It's our 8 quadrants. And the last thing I want to say before I open up for questions is, if you're listening to this, you're like, oh my God, I so wish I had known this before. Like, my kid is now 6 or 8 or 11 or 15, and I was a responsible doer. I just wasn't there. It's never, ever too late to start. Never. Never. No matter how old your kids are. If you haven't been fully present, you can start tomorrow without even explaining anything to your kids. Just do it. If the workload in your house is not equal and someone has become the default arranger, it's never too late to start. So how do we... one little bit of the science. This book is mostly not the science. That was the hardest part of writing the book, was leaving it all out. But I left a few things in that I think are important. So you may have heard that 90% of who we become as adults is the result of what happens in the first 5 to 7 years of life. Talk about pressure. It would be a pretty cruel joke of nature if the greatest impact we have as parents is when we are the least experienced. Luckily, recent science has found that while the early years do matter, the later years do too. And brain plasticity, and I'm sure you guys have heard some of this, they've discovered brain plasticity continues throughout life, all the way through into your, to death, into your 90s. Our neural circuitry and brain architecture are able to grow and develop well into adulthood. We all make mistakes as parents, but kids are forgiving and resilient. The heart just wants to connect. Think about it. Even as adults, if anybody takes 10 minutes to be fully present with us, we feel so important and we feel so loved. That's all we all really want. So you can start tomorrow and hit reset. I'm going to open it up for questions.